Commandment 6, Part 5. What to do instead. Now this question here about what to do instead is a little bit of a trick question here. In pretty much every modern society, everyone views the taking of someone else's life through murder is something that is bad and shouldn't be done. However, in this study, we are instead looking at what the Bible has to say about these topics, not necessarily what the world might say. However, to start, there are all sorts of verses that we can find in the New Testament that talk about how murdering is something that is considered bad and is a sin. Just to list a couple of them, in James chapter 4, verse 2, Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 22, Matthew chapter 15, verse 19, and in Revelations chapter 21, verse 8. These are just to name a couple of different New Testament references. However, even though just these 4 different verses found in different chapters of the Bible, we are able to get the point that murder is something that is not condoned or something that we as Christians should not be doing. However, the question for this section is what we are needing to be doing instead. To answer this question, there's a couple of different verses that we need to look at to get this answer. One of them is found over in Matthew chapter 26, verses 52 through 53, in which it says, "Then Jesus said to him, 'Put up your sword again into its place, for all who take the sword shall perish with a sword. Do you not think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels?'" Through this section of scriptures, we can see that even though at least one of them had a sword with them and was ready to fight to protect Jesus and to save him from the fate that was about to befall him, the important thing here to look at is instead Jesus' reaction to it, in which Jesus is able to very clearly state that if he wanted to, he could have called a bunch of angels to his side to fight and destroy anyone or anything that he wanted. However, Jesus knew that all of this death and violence was not the answer. There was only one death that needed to happen, and that was his death on the cross for our sins. There are other verses that are out there that talk about what it is that we are needing to be doing instead. Verses like Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 10, in which it says, "Owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not lust." If there is any other commandment, it is summed up in this word: "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Love works no ill to its neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. In this 9th verse here, it talks about a couple of different things that we should not be doing, like stealing, false witnesses, etc., etc. But the main one that we are looking at today is that murder is something that is included on this list here. Now, the important thing to take away from this 9th verse specifically is the end of it. In this, it talks about the commandment that we are needing to be remembering, and by remembering this one command, it is supposed to make it so we in turn make it so we don't do any of these other sins that were on this list. That is, that we are supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. The reason it words it like this is because if we love someone like ourselves, would we want to murder, steal, bear false witness, or whatever the case might be against them? All of this is why it leads up to this 10th verse here, where it is able to clearly tell us that what we are needing to do is to love. Whenever we love, there is no way that we can be doing harm or ill towards anyone else. It is only through this love that we will be able to make it so that we can make it easier to be able to fulfill and to follow the law and commandments that are found throughout the Bible. The last verse that we are going to be looking at in this section can be found over in Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. And do not fear those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Whenever it comes to murder, we are told in the other verses that we have looked at that love conquers all. However, there is something else that we are needing to remember, is that we don't need to worry about the people who might be able to kill the body, but instead we need to be making sure that we are focusing on the spiritual well-being by making sure that we are following what the Bible has to say throughout our life so that our soul won't die.